All right, thank you for coming. We're so excited today to be here with Emily, who is the co-founder of Delegate Solutions, which is a strategic support firm. Emily speaks nationally on the topic of virtual business. She's been featured in the New York Times, NBC News, and Martha Stewart Radio. And she was recruited to develop a leading virtual training program for an East Coast college consortium, where she personally developed 2 of the courses on virtual entrepreneurship. She is a Goldman Sachs 10K SB alum. Is that how you say it, Emily?
Yeah, 10,000 small businesses.
Oh, 10,000 Small Businesses alum. And she's a graduate of UPenn. One of the things I'm fascinated by, she's the designer of what's called the Delegate method, which is a method that helps entrepreneurs identify areas of their business that they can either delegate or automate for maximum efficiency. And I find this fascinating. This year alone, her team has cleared nearly 8,000 hours of tasks off the plate of busy business owners. And, I translate that immediately into, full-time employees, which are 80 hours a year. So that's the equivalent of 4 full-time employees' tasks that they've cleared off the plates of busy businesses. A little bit of a background. We first connected, Duncan Colaveria, Anna Marie, and I first connected with Emily last year when both of our companies were featured on Startup Nation's Top 100 Leading Moms list. And we've been talking with Emily and her staff, and we thought it would be great for our 2 companies to partner in some way, because both of our companies are so passionate about making working virtually a better reality for so many businesses that are either run virtually or work with geographically dispersed teams. We're actually in the process of training Delegate Solutions staff on using Flipside Workspace so that we can offer their administrative assistance during our Flipside meetings. That's a topic for another time. Today, we really want to learn from Emily, and we are so excited to have you here today, Emily. Thank you.
Thank you. This is my first presentation at Flipside, so bear with me.
So, to get started, Emily, I was wondering if you could help define the term virtual support. It's used in a lot of different ways here. So maybe just to get us all on the same starting page, maybe you could define that term virtual support for us, for teams and for virtually run businesses.
Sure. So my definition of virtual support is really that work remotely to support our clients with their administrative needs. It's quite same functionality that you would experience with someone sitting right next to you in terms of the types of tasks that you can delegate down to your team member, but we are a much more strategic and cost-effective solution for small business owners because you don't have to incur the traditional type costs of having an employee, and you also gain access to high caliber staff who are more accountable, or at least at my company, they are accountable to other people besides you to ensure that the work is done.
Excellent. So let's back up a second. What are some of the typical reasons that small businesses and virtual teams would turn to a company such as yourself, or turn to using virtual support? Like, what is it in their existing structure that a virtual support team might be replacing?
So in some cases, they are remote themselves, so they work from home, they work from a space like yours. They don't necessarily have office space or need office space, real estate-wise. And when that is the situation, they don't have anywhere to house their staff. So that's one key reason why. For others, maybe do have office space, it's a great way to supplement what they already have in place, because we can either reduce overhead but maintain the quality on the key work that needs to get done, or we can supplement their key team members as needed with projects, so you could avoid having to hire a full-time person.
So my understanding is that there is kind of a spectrum of the different types of virtual support that's available. Can you walk us through some of that?
Sure. So The initial level is what we call transactional delegation. So it's really task driven, and it depends on tasks that you can delegate to someone else. So, for example, um, make a dinner reservation for me at this restaurant tomorrow night, or order this present for this person I just had a meeting with. So that's really paying per task. Then the second level is what I would consider to be a traditional virtual assistant. So it's you can engage with someone to support you. They are basically looking to you to identify what to delegate down to them. And then the third model is, I think, where my company sits, which is strategic delegation, where we work to understand what your end goals are and sort of design a delegation strategy around your specific needs.
And then are these needs, are they generally administrative in nature, or is, a virtual support team, tied in with marketing or maybe some other business functions?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, with the exception of filing and getting your coffee, there's really not much we can't do, and we can even file and order coffee for you.
Oh gosh.
So, you know, if you're asking for tasks, a lot of it help with scheduling. So if you have a lot of appointments that need to get scheduled and confirmed and coordinated, sometimes that's a fairly robust process. We help with that. We can help with marketing automation, so sending out your email blasts, setting up your blog posts, your social media posts. We'll do a lot of work with expense reporting and invoicing possibly to your clients. We also can perform personal concierge type services related to, for example, I had my assistant research gymnastics programs in the area for my son, figure out the pricing, figure out what the timing was, and get him scheduled to go. So helping with various personal tasks that still sit on the plates of entrepreneurs that they don't specifically need to do, but need to get done in their life.
That's great because, one of the things about, remote workers especially is they tend to have such a challenge balancing the whole work life. So it's interesting to think about it in that way of virtual support, both personal and professional. Pretty
Yeah,
neat.
and I think the other benefit of working with a virtual support person is that there's absolutely no awkwardness around delegation of personal tasks that you might experience within your office if you have an in-office assistant. So, it's very objective at that point.
And what about with like virtual teams? Like how does a virtual support team help with working with virtual teams? What are some of
Um,
the tasks that like a virtual support team might be able to do? I know one of the things that we talked about here that made sense in Flipside was, assistance with people booking the conference room and taking meeting notes and following up and distributing those. But are there some other ways that virtual support teams, either yours or anybody else's, supports virtual teams?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we work with a lot of solopreneurs, but we also work with a lot of small businesses that have teams. So, within a tool like Asana, there's ways that you can easily delegate down tasks outward to a firm like mine. What we look for is what are things that you're working on that someone else could be working on your behalf, but they still need to get done for the business to move forward. So, for example, research is a great example of that. So everyone needs research performed in their business. Um, they don't necessarily need to be the one performing the research. They just need to get the data back to them. Um, Work with distributed teams, typically taking direction from one person, but the team has access to utilize the service.
Oh, that's really neat. Okay. So, let's talk a little bit about the logistics of working with virtual support companies, be it Delegate Solutions or any other. It seemed to me that there would have to be either protocols or certain expectations that need to be in place in order for there to be a successful partnership. one of the things that I think about is, you know, virtual support is conceptually awesome, but then there's the logistics of, oh my gosh, I need to take the time to train someone to do that. So how do you respond to that for companies, or how do you help create these expectations for companies to kind of ease that transition?
Yeah. So I think that that's a universal concern, whether the person is virtual or sitting in your office each day.
True.
Um, you know, that's always something that you should be focusing on when you're delegating down across your team. But we have a few, recommendations to help with that process. First, when you're delegating work, you want to be really clear around what you want the end product to be so that the person is working towards the same goal that you have in your mind, rather than giving them specific instructions on exactly how you want them to perform the task. Give them what you want it to look like as a deliverable.
Okay, that's great.
And the second one, from a support standpoint, it's really helpful to us if you share the big picture around how the task we've been assigned might fit into your overriding goal or project. It just gives a lot more insight to what we're doing.
Excellent.
Um, then three, it's really about delegating the end result and letting the assistant figure out how they want to get there. And sometimes they might surprise you and come up with a very unique, different way of figuring that solution out that you might not have thought of. And then lastly, there really needs to be a commitment to the process, both on your end as the client and on our end as the assistant, to making the process work for each of us.
And what does that entail? Is that like coming up with like a communication schedule, or commitment to certain technology, or what do you mean by the commitment to the process?
Well, a commitment that it might not always be perfect. I think um, a lot of people aim for perfection, and that could slow them down from actually making any progress. So we try to say, like, shoot for 80%, shoot for getting someone else to take something off your plate to get it to 80%. That's still going to free up your time, and that's going to give you something to work with that you can then tweak, really get it to the place where you want it to be. But have them do 80% of the legwork.
I like that thinking. Um,
Yeah.
okay,
But
so what's a good way for virtual businesses and virtual teams to determine whether or not they can or even should look to virtual support services?
well, I think any growing business has an administrative function going on within the business, even at the beginning levels. At the early stages, the entrepreneur is typically handling those tasks themselves. And what happens is you reach a cap in your capability of how much work you can actually handle on any given day, and quickly realize that you need to free up your time to focus on the larger picture initiatives rather than the day-to-day operations of the business. So once you reach that cap, that's when you really need to start thinking about what sort of support makes the most.
And that's thinking in terms of too, like weighing those pros and cons of hiring that support directly or supplementing it with a virtual support team.
Right. So in our case, we try to be specialized in strategic delegation. So we really want to understand what your goals are, and what your key priorities are, and then we help you work through the process of identifying which tasks or responsibilities could be delegated off your plate so that someone else could handle them. So
Excellent.
we're trying to focus on top level stuff.
And I like that too. Like a couple of things that you said that really have struck a chord with me is that bringing it to the 80%, but don't necessarily micromanage how it gets to that 80%.
Right.
That's nice. So let's talk about some of the financial benefits you've seen for your clients. One of the things I mentioned it before strikes me is the 8,000 hours of tasks that you have taken off businesses' plates. Solutions. Can you give some other examples of some of the benefits that you've seen for your clients, either in their growth or in save time and money?
Sure. So, it's a simple math equation, really. If you're billing out a rate at 100, 150, $200 an hour, um, rates to work with teams like ours are in the ballpark of $50 an hour. So if you're able to delegate, 3 hours of work off your plate, you're essentially making triple what you would normally make, because you could now then free up that time to work and focus on high value activities.
Excellent. All right, so I want to be sensitive to the time, so one last question here. Can you give us some do's and don'ts, or share some tips that you've learned along the way that would help us all in working with virtual teams or running virtual businesses?
Yeah, I think you want to have an accountability structure in place with the group or person that you're working with. That just sort of adds to the security of the fact that the team is distributed, and sometimes that feels different than someone sitting right in front of you. So, look for some system to hold the team or the team member accountable for completion of work up to your standard. You also want to have the right technology in place so that you can monitor the work that's being done from both a time standpoint and also quality standpoint. So when you're delegating tasks, you always want to give a parameter around what is your expectation of when the task needs to be completed by, how much time you expect the task to take. The more information you can give up front is really helpful, especially when you're working with teams that are billing by the hour, by the minute. It's important to set some structure around that. And lastly, communication is really key, so make sure you have at least a weekly touch point with your team to check in on progress.
Excellent. And I just wanted to circle back to one thing that you brought up with the task management. Is Asana the product you recommend for task management?
Yes, we love Asana.
Uh-huh.
It's perfect for distributed teams. And I think what we love most about it is that it already creates the internal accountability that I was talking about, but it also takes communication around projects and tasks outside of email and inside of a tool, so that you're not trying to manage all the moving parts and logistics of things inside your email.
Excellent. I like that.
Okay, Emily, this is Jim.
Hey.
I'm a classic case of someone who doesn't know how to delegate very well, and I'm a solopreneur, not growing a business so much right now, but keeping one going. I think the thing that you talked about that I'm most interested in and would like to hear a little bit more about is how you work with someone like me to help me figure out what I can delegate and what its value will be for me to do that.
Thank you. That's a great question. I think biggest roadblock that we experience with clients not starting with the service is this fear of not sure where to start and feeling embarrassed, or things are such a mess they don't even know where to start. So,
That's me. That's me.
So we say bring your messes, and our job is to help ask the right questions to get some traction around supporting you. So we work to understand your goals. So we look to hear what you're working towards. We look to see what are things going on in your business that you're doing that someone else could be doing for you or that you don't enjoy. And then we also look at ways that we can systematize and automate different processes within your business, maximize everybody's time.
Okay. And I guess that leads me to ask, how do you deal with, in a virtual case, which is most of the case, I'm sure, most times, with file sharing, file access, having both access and a reasonable amount of security at the same time for my files and my assistant's files? How would that work? Or how do you do that?
Oh, that's not complicated. So there's a lot of tools out there. Asana is one that Lisa mentioned. Basecamp is another that we use with clients. We could also utilize Dropbox or Google Drive to have shared files as well. Some larger companies might already have their own servers, in which case we could just be plugged in to work off of those servers.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, perhaps I will turn to some basics issues, but I would like to get a comment on this point. I find that in this idea of virtual cooperation, virtual work, there is a lot of problems in people not being trained understand the discipline of being in a virtual space, like not being able to manage floor control, the turn, timing and discipline when you exchange mails, and so updating, for instance, your status, making sure that like in a application like Asana, you have you update, all the objects, virtual objects that belong to you, be it tasks or be it appointments, be it files, and so on. I find that people are a lot of difficulty to replay in the virtual world disciplines that probably they are very natural in the real world. I don't know if you have this experience or if you want to comment on this.
Well, I can comment on what we do at my company. So I think the difference that you might find is that we are an internally managed team. So people working with our clients are accountable not only to the client, but they're accountable to us as the company. So we have a lot of oversight into what's being done with regards to your work. Second to that is really you need to have the right expectations going in with some clarity around when this person is available, what expectations around turnaround time, how do you want to be notified when project statuses, things like that. We would discuss those things up front so you'd have a better, you'd be more comfortable with the situation.
And it works. I mean, you get an improvement by insisting, in this kind of preliminary action.
You should insist on that, yeah. And you should insist on, at least once a week, a phone call where you guys are talking and checking in around projects that are open. At my company, we like to look and see what's coming up, what's past that we need to deal with, and like what are the priorities for the week. That's the typical agenda we have on our check-in.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Question. I have to say that is one of the things that I really appreciate about Emily's company, Delegate Solutions, that I think is very different from other type of virtual assistant resources that I've heard about, at least. Having that layer of support staff within the company rather than just directly one-on-one with a virtual assistant, I think is a nice assurance that the quality of the outcomes are going to be there, and knowing that there's resources for whoever is your point of contact for the virtual support, knowing that they also have resources to help them do their job, I think is something that's pretty unique, and I like that a lot about Delegate Solutions.
Thank you. Yeah, I like to say that we've heard enough of the stories about how things haven't worked out with virtual assistants that we've really worked to resolve them with the way that we deliver this service, and just to kind of provide that it's a scalable solution, but it's also a managed solution, so that you're not just hiring a person, you're hiring a firm that has history and credibility and a brand and a method.
Fantastic. This occurs to me just out of a logistics. So because you're hiring a company, you're not going through the W-2s, is that right? Or does that still happen?
Clients will issue us a W-2. My clients will issue Delegate a W-2. Most of my team is employees, so they are getting treated as employees of Delegate Solutions.
Right. Nice. Okay. Any more questions?
Well, if I may I?
Absolutely.
Well, this is just a curiosity that I would like to know within the range of your customers if any special industry sector is more active or more reactive to mode of working, or is it spread around more or less evenly? What is your experience?
Well, I think the majority of clients that utilize this type of service at the basic level is really solopreneurs. I'm personally
Startups, you
looking.
mean startups
No,
like
I
this?
mean
No?
independent entrepreneurs that work by themselves.
Ah,
Sort of the key user, because they have the administrative need, but they don't necessarily need a full-time person, but they need at least an hour or two a day of help. And they want really qualified help.
so it's individuals rather than groups.
Correct.
So I understand well. Do I understand?
I do work with small and mid-sized companies as well, but I think traditionally those are the core users.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Well, I do want to thank everybody for coming today, and especially Emily, thank you so much for taking the time to come here and answer our questions. I hope everybody was able to walk away with some new information to help them work with their virtual teams or virtual businesses. I will mention as a thank you, Emily. Emily has graciously offered to give a free one-to-one productivity consultation to Flipside Workspace members and their guests. So Emily can help you assess your time. This going back to you, Jim, I guess.
Yeah,
Help you
I
assess
can
your
use it.
time. Yeah, and identify the areas of your business or personal life that you can automate or delegate to help improve your productivity. So
I'd love to
Emily's
have that conversation. Thank you very much, Emily.
Thanks, Jane.
I need the help.
Great.
Emily's email is on the board. If you want to zoom in, you can just zoom into screen 3. Her email address is there. And you can just email her directly to take advantage of that offer. So thank you, everybody, and thank you, especially Emily.
Thank you all so much for coming.
Lisa, you have to implement an applause action for the avatar.
Yes, I love it. I know, right now I'll just wave at you, Emily.
Great, thank you for having me. Thank you both all for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks again.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you very much.